Welcome to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where we make investing, and today we're going to make entrepreneurship absolutely simple. My guest is a great friend of mine for many years, Bob Lachance. Bob, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
And just remember, like, subscribe, click your notification bell, and most importantly, go to yourinvestingclass.com. We have so many goodies right there right now. The one we have right now is really a big deal. There are 6 numbers that if a person learns a few habits attached to those 6 numbers in your life, absolutely brings wealth. And so check it out because it's free and it will change your life. Thought-provoking, great stuff. Yourinvestingclass.com. Get there. Bob Lachance, I'm going to introduce my good friend. We've known each other I don't know how many years, and we're both entrepreneurs. We both invest. Bob is a tremendous real estate mind, but even more a business mind. And I was actually just back east in his offices in Connecticut just last week. And we get together, 3-4 times a year just to talk about persuasion, influence, training, sales, entrepreneurship, all that good stuff. And when we were back there a while back, we said, we should get together and share what you know on the podcast. So Bob was nice enough to come on. I think he's got a great story. We're both sports guys. The difference is he was good at his sport. He's a hockey guy. So Bob, thanks for being with us. Let's start off before we show people, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, working on the business instead of in it, using, how to use a virtual assistant, all that type of stuff. But before we hop into your thoughts on entrepreneurship, give us a little background. Tell us about hockey, what it meant, the whole journey up till now. Take it away.
Will do. I'll keep this short. But you and I both played college sports. I went to Boston University, and you were out there in Utah. And we were fortunate enough. I played there for 4 years. Fortunate enough to win a national championship my 3rd year in playing at Boston University, and then my last year, I got offered a 2-year contract with St. Louis Blues. That was the team who drafted me. And I had a very challenging decision to make because they were offering me $110,000 signing bonus. This was a lot of money back in the day, right? $110,000 signing bonus for a 23-year-old kid, or stick it out and finish my degree. So, you put yourself back in their shoes. What are you going to do? Of course, I took the money and I said,
I'm taking the money and running, man.
I'm running. I took the money because I always said, hey, you know what? I could go back to school. Yeah. All right. Fast forward 8 years when I retired. Guess what? Never went back to school. So it's actually pretty interesting. So, I played 8 years, 4 years here in the U.S., 4 years in Europe. I played 1 exhibition game, fortunate enough to play 1 exhibition game. Never made the NHL, but really, really good career. And then towards the end of my career, my oldest now was born, and so I missed his birth, which was not good because I was playing in Belarus at the Continental Cup when I was playing in Switzerland, and because we had a planned pregnancy, and that didn't go well because whatever, ended up coming a little early.
By the way, pregnancies are always nice when they're planned.
That's
on
right.
both ends of the deal. Yeah.
So that was obviously a challenge. Missed that one, and then started got me thinking, saying, all right, there's got to be life after sports. I wasn't making the NHL. I was making okay money, right? And then I decided my last year that this was going to be my last year, and I had to look at what kind of. I didn't want to go back to school, so that was my challenge. Was my point of decision was I going to go back to school, finish those 2 classes, or jump into an industry that did not need a degree. So everything kept pointing me back to real estate. So, bought courses, etc., got educated in it, decided to jump into real estate instead of going back to school. And then this was back in 2004. And through that time, I've done everything from single families to multifamily to commercial. I helped start a couple of real estate education programs, and I started a virtual assistant staffing company as well. Through that time, done thousands and thousands of deals. You saw my team today, and I also have a real estate investment company. We do a lot of transactions a year. And obviously the result of that, Andy, has been, allowing us to be, around the same individuals, to learn more and to be able to give back. And, it's just nice to be able to give back once you have a lot of that education and experience to be able to give back. And thank you again for having me on your podcast. So that's the long and short of it.
Well, I'll tell you, Bob's done it a long time, and he's done it a lot of times, and his results have been phenomenal. So that's fantastic. Let's start here. You mentioned your hockey career, which was much better than my basketball career. Our mutual friend who we met through was Than Merrill, who had a short NFL career. A lot of the guys we knew, like old Shawnee Mack was a punter for about 2 weeks. He got a big $80,000 signing bonus for punt for 2 weeks. And a lot of us, we never hit the NBA or the NHL, and Than dabbled in the NFL for a while. Entrepreneurship is there's so many guys like that. And entrepreneurship is certainly about spirit. So talk about that toughness. I think today'd be easier to be an entrepreneur than ever, because there's a lot of cupcakes out there, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people there's a lot of people that just haven't been brought up with the toughness that it takes to do it. So if you have it, my gosh, and then there's technology. So talk a little bit about that as far as spirit and, slaying dragons. And, it's not like anyone grabs the podium at Entrepreneur of the Year dinner and says, well, I'm surprised you guys didn't win this because it was so easy. No dragons to slay, no mountains to climb. I didn't need any help either. I did this all by myself. No one says that. So talk about that a bit.
No, not at all. And I think, just to get back to what you're saying, I think having a sports background, and we also have a podcast called Pucks to Properties where we interview just ex-athletes, mainly hockey players that are now in the real estate world. They went from obviously the locker room to the real estate world. And I think, for us, just me, you, everyone else that was an athlete growing up, I think what we learn in the locker room, what we learn playing sports, relates very, very closely to business. You're used to the chaos. You're used to the ups and downs. You're used to getting beat up and having to get back up. You're used to, I remember my sophomore year in college, we lost 9-1 in the national championship game on ESPN. Now, that is one of the most humbling experiences you will ever see, because you have all your buddies, friends, family watching you on national TV. But it was also the best thing that ever happened, because we got beat up, we got knocked down. I'll never forget sitting in that locker room looking at everyone's faces. Half the guys are crying. I had another year, but the seniors, they're going through different emotions than I did. But we had a look in our eyes saying, you know what, next year, no one's going to even touch us. So we mowed through everyone the year after. So that summer, obviously, we went into the summer just focusing on doing one thing, winning a championship. And we did that. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it's interesting. I shouldn't confess this because people are going to think I'm a horrible dad and a horrible parent. I have a rule that my kids are not allowed to mow the lawn. I've never mowed my lawn. We hire that done, and the reason is it's too easy. It's too easy to go out and just mow grass and spend your time mowing grass. What's hard is to get in the gym every day. We set a goal. My son said he wanted to play hoop too. He knew he'd be tall like me. And I said, by the time you are a senior, you got to have 1 million makes, not 1 million shots, 1 million makes. So we did the math. And of course, when you're young, you don't want to kill your kid, but we're going to shoot these at an elevated heart rate. We're going to shoot these difficult, not play, work. And you're going to work harder on the ice. And you're going to work harder and more physical and brutal on the football field. And you're going to push your body harder in preparing for that just physical greatness. It's just a game, but you get more out of that than just mowing the grass. And I would rather see my kid in the weight room pushing iron. I'd rather have them learning. If you're mowing the grass, you do that once you kind of figure it out. No, my son's going to learn how to invest in options. He's going to learn how to trade stocks. He's going to learn about the grind of entrepreneurship and learn to be freaking tough. Yeah. Learn to lose, learn to miss shots, learn to have referees that are unfair and incompetent. And, there's a toughness that comes through. Sports provide this incredible adversity for everyone involved, parents, coaches. You got to learn to be unselfish, teamwork, all that selfishness that somehow you got to get it to come together, and personal interest and team interest. All that stuff is entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, because you made me think of a lot of stuff when I was actually growing up. I used to run telephone poles against my brothers. I used to go in the backyard. I used to shoot 250 pucks a day. My father would give me a little thing to write down, and backhand, forehand, everything. And then it was just pretty interesting. And my dad did that by design, right? Just like you with your son. And the one thing is, we're only going to be as good as we're going to be, right? As parents, you could have 2 kids or 3 kids doing the same thing, but one's going to excel better just because they're better.
Yeah.
Right? My middle brother was number 4 in the world draft pick, played in the NHL for 14 years, right? Me, not so much, but had a great career, right? It's how you look at things. I think everything's in the eye of the beholder, and how you perceive things, right? Whether positive or negative. And I think that, for me, what I learned in the hockey locker room and working sports was that work ethic. And you said something very interesting. Today, the kids don't have that. We also didn't have this thing that's awful for everybody.
Yeah.
Which is a big distraction.
Killing
However,
it.
that distraction can also be a incredible weapon to use because of the content. Like you said, our kids are getting educated all day long, hopefully in the right way compared to the wrong way. But like you said, work ethic is top of the heap.
So you start, a guy's at a 9 to 5, and someone's listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast, and they're saying, hey, I want to make more money in my life. I want to have money work for me rather than being a slave to money. That means you got to be bigger than the money. If the money's bigger than you, you're going to work for it. It will lead you. If you're bigger and stronger than the money, you can control it. So the first thing starts with that drive and that, fight, and you got to want to put up your dukes. The problem with the job is, if people hate it, it's hard for different reasons. It's hard because it's irritating. It's hard because you'd rather do other stuff. It's hard because the boss has got his thumb on you or whatever. But once you get that spirit and that fight and say, you know what, there'd be a much more interesting life for me to solve more difficult problems than these, that's the first step. Okay, so great. You got fight, you got spirit, which is enough to go get yourself in trouble.
That's right.
So the next step is competency. And, I have to admit that I learned a lot by making mistakes and losing a lot of money. I don't know, if you just went on a rocket ship straight up. I don't know. I didn't. I lost a lot of money and made a lot of mistakes. So let's talk about getting educated. Once a person feels they got the fight and they feel they're not a cupcake and they can go after it, tell me a little bit about how you got educated. If I say, how did you learn? Because, you go to school, they even have entrepreneurship classes at the community college taught by a non-entrepreneur. Yeah. But how do you really learn it? What's the education piece?
So, it's funny. It's I wrote this down. I can't remember. I literally just wrote it down while we were talking. Learn it, live it, gift it. So for me, I bought a course. And I didn't know anything about real estate. I have to understand. I knew nothing. I came from the hockey locker room for 8 years. And one thing I did have is a work ethic. So, and I knew I had to support my family somehow. Didn't know how, but I knew somehow. So what I did was I door knocked for a year straight. So I would get someone who's behind on their mortgage, and I would go door to door to door from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every Monday through Friday, with my mindset saying, all right, I got to learn this business from ground up. Then I went to a real estate investment association, learned more. Bought another course. This was on short sales. So I'm like, all right, now I'm a short sale investor, right? Ended up making an offer on a house, did a rehab, made $32,000 though in 2 months. But I also realized I had no systems and processes. I was just, I was a hamster on a wheel, if you will. So, brute force. I didn't know. Education back. There was no education. There was no podcasts like this. I couldn't listen to or reach out to mentors, etc. So I joined my real estate association. I saw Pat Precor. I actually hired his son, works for me right now. It's actually funny. It comes full circle. Yeah. And he took me on. He said, hey, I'm looking to build my team. And I said, all right, perfect. And my mindset was, I want to learn again from ground up another skill, not knowing I was going to be partners with him for 10 years. But was it easy? Heck no. I joined his team. Like I said, I door knocked. Then I brought someone on a door knock for me, and then I negotiated with banks. And then, we lost money. I remember a knockdown rebuild out of my element, lost $150,000 on a knockdown rebuild, Greenwich, Connecticut.
That's a nice little tuition in the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard. And I of course, at that time, I wasn't making a lot of money, and I put it on my HELOC. So I'm like, all right, I got to pay this off pretty quick. But the point is that that was also another great lesson for me in entrepreneurship, knowing that if you work hard enough, you can make a lot of money in this business. And you put your mind to certain things, and you have the right team and right mentors, you can make a lot of money.
So you learned by experience, just doing stuff, just making mistakes, trying stuff. It wasn't a classroom experience, but you started with a course, and then you started action. You started going. And you mentioned, go ahead.
I said, you and I deal with a lot of, and through the years, I've dealt with a lot of students that we've coached. And you realize the most successful ones are the ones that take action right away. They don't just sit there and analyze stuff too much.
Yeah, you fail forward fast. Mm-hmm. So you start with this spirit and the fight, and then you start getting experience and you do things to learn. I thought one of the things you said that was insightful, and I've done the same thing, is most people, like this is right out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad actually, is the first principle in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is rich don't work for money. So when you went out to door knock, you were working, but the sixth principle, and then this is really important for people to catch, is you work to learn. So the principle number one in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is rich don't work for money. We're not going to go out and knock doors. We might get some money for doing it, but it's tangential to the reason you went to door knock is I'm going to learn the business from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I took a door knocking job myself, actually, just because I was curious about what I could learn. I was in a 7-Eleven buying a drink or whatever, and I had the gift of gab. You can't shut me up. I got a podcast now. And I was talking to someone about something. This guy comes up out of nowhere. He says, yeah, you seem like you got a forward personality. Do you want to sell water softeners door to door for a while? I go, when can I start? So I went out on a Saturday where I didn't have to go to work. And I door knocked just for this. I didn't want to. It wasn't about the money. It was about I want to learn how do you do this? How does that work? And so to work. You said it twice. You said, okay, now I'm going to learn this from the ground up. I'm going to learn it from the ground up by doing stuff to learn, rather than because I'm going to go out and try to make cash doing it. I think that's a huge insight for anyone listening. Is are you learning by what you're doing, or are you doing it for money or for personal development? And I say this a lot on the podcast, Bob, and I already know the answer to this, so this is softball. When people decide they want to be an investor or they want to be an entrepreneur, they think they're doing it for the money. And sure they are. But what they're going to find is they've actually thrown themselves into a project of personal development where all of their weaknesses will be rooted out in a very painful manner and put on display for the world. Any comments on that one?
Oh, I could definitely agree with that one. There's so many humbling times when you're being an entrepreneur that you stumble, you fall, you get back up, you stumble, you fall. But the beauty of that is over time, you start getting calloused. And it doesn't hurt anymore, right? And you also start understanding that you have to build a team, you have to work with people, and you could start outsourcing some of the things that have hurt you, if you will, because we're not great at everything. Let's call it what it is. I mean, there's probably one person in the world, or I don't know, 1% of the people that are great at everything. I don't know.
Leonardo da Vinci, he can paint and do math, beat you in the 100-yard dash.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all have. There's a lot of weaknesses that we all have. I have a ton of them, which I'm okay with because, like you said, you get those exposed over time. But then you get the privilege of being able to understand what weaknesses you have. So then you could start building a team around those weaknesses to where you could excel. Like I know, Andy, we talked about this. You love the persuasion. You love the sales. You love that. You love educating. And that's the beauty of, whatever you find to be your strength, you could then hone in on it and really, really attack it.
So look, this is a great transition. We've kind of been talking about the individual, the grit, the education, the fight, personal development. And then you made a great comment here where you said, now I didn't have any systems, I didn't have any procedures, and I didn't have a team and have other people. And you can see this natural transition in your story where you're going to go from working on yourself and kind of being involved in everything to now stepping back and working on the business instead of in it. So when we come back from break, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about, I'd love to hear more about your VA business. I'd love to hear more about how those processes and systems come. So when we come back, we'll talk about making that actual transition from being more of a technician-oriented guy in the middle of everything to a true owner that is leading the orchestra. And the guy leading the orchestra doesn't play an instrument. He doesn't make a sound. I mean, there's zero music coming out of that guy. He's the only person in the orchestra that is silent and just sits there and waves his arms. So we'll come back right after this break.
Responsive to questions, they're very detailed in their training. You can start from no investing experience whatsoever and get educated and be able to make a nice retirement for yourself or even a living. It's an amazing educational system, and I would highly recommend it. The one thing that will get you more confident in investing is your education, your competency, and if you can get to that point, you can do anything.
Welcome back to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. We make investing simple. We're making entrepreneurship simple. I've got my good friend Bob Lachance here, ultra awesome entrepreneur. We've been talking about grit. We've been talking about sports and fight, learning a business, and now talk a little bit about that transition. I think it's easier for a hockey player to do this because he's been a part of a team. Maybe a golfer is more solo. I don't know. I'm terrible. My golf game's so bad. But talk a little bit about the systems and the people and the machine that you create that gives value to the world, right? Because that's really what entrepreneurship is. You're going to solve some problems for the world, but you're going to put together a team and procedures of that team to do it. Give us insight on that.
One of the things I learned when I was very, very fortunate. Like I said, I like to say luck, but you put yourself in the position to be lucky, I feel, right? Like I said, Pat Precourt, I owe a lot to him. One thing he did teach me, this is when I first started door knocking, it was 2004. I met him right at the end of 2004. And he said when I started working with him, he said, make sure you document everything you do. And I didn't really understand it, but as that time, I started doing short sales. So now I'm on the phone with banks. So I said, all right. I started identifying and documenting everything. And before you know it, we had I think it was a 4-course manual. Like we talked about, I sold this on stage at one point too. But now we started to understand we created everything that we did and put it in a manual. So then we would hire someone else and I would give it to them. So that's what I did first with door knocking. Created something, hired through door knocker. And then I started working with banks, negotiating short sales, negotiating with banks, liens, all that kind of good stuff. Created another manual, brought someone on, passed it off to them, and they would do that job. So Pat taught me all of the documentation, what you need to do, and that's exactly it. And it kind of hit me. Now we have AI that'll actually create that for you. It's kind of wild when you put different prompts in there because I'm using that right now too.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we had to literally write everything down, type it in, print it out, and create manuals, which was very, very, for me, it was incredible, and that was the best advice I ever got. So I started doing that. And then as I grew, you create these manuals, you could step out of being, that technician into a manager. So I brought someone else on, I would manage that individual, and then I'll bring on a manager, and then I moved into kind of the owner's box-ish at that time because, I was doing so many different things. I was running a real estate coaching program. I was running my real estate business. I was also negotiating with banks. So I was in the rat race.
Grinding, yeah.
Which is fine because at that time, this is when I first started. I feel like you have to go through that stuff, for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years to get to, before you know it, 20 years goes like that. We can speak that way because we've been doing it that long, but it does go fast. And too many people are are in a hurry to get rich quick. It just does not happen that way.
Yeah, it does. It's a grind for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, you started a business that I think is fascinating, and I want to learn more about it. Is I love the ideas of assist. John Stockton's my favorite basketball player because he wasn't as good as Michael Jordan or those guys. No one was. But the reason he was my favorite is I think he did the most with the least. And if you think about when that guy played, if you put him maybe in a quickness combine strength contest, like who's quicker, him or Isaiah Thomas or Rod Strickland or Allen Iverson or Kevin Johnson, any of those guys he played with, just incredible. That he would have the most assists, the most steals, the longest career of any of those guys with what he didn't have. So he wrote a book that I thought was a beautiful book. The name of his biography is called Assisted. So here you got the guy who assisted others more than anyone ever did it, more assists than anyone ever did it. He says, my life is about being assisted. And it is a chronology of the people in his life that helped him get where he wanted to be. So that brought a new richness to the word assistant, to be assisted, to have someone help me do what I'm trying to do. Well, when I think virtual assistant, I think about someone maybe in a foreign country that doesn't. I get this vision that I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to hear a boiler room of a bunch of people just working away, and they're struggling to understand my language and my accent and their accent. So convince me that that's just not the craziest idea in the world. What do you know about the virtual assistant business, and why is what have you learned? What do you do differently than maybe what everybody else is trying to do, and why is that a game changer for the entrepreneurs to learn about VAs?
Before I start that, I do have to say that's when basketball was fun to watch back in the day.
It used to be.
It used to be. Not anymore. I do have to. I'm gonna agree with you on that one. It was so much better than when John Stockton and all those guys were there. But
he passed the ball. Yeah,
unbelievable. Yeah, there wasn't 1,000 points a game.
Well, it's the same as hockey because you have spacing, which is really important to make guys guard space. Mm-hmm. And so you establish and maintain this spacing. The defense really has to work because you're so spread out. And then you have, everyone has a role and a position, and there's an orchestration to that, and a togetherness and a trust and a mental idea of knowing what's each going to do. Now it's just one-on-one, and it's just, I don't think hockey's degraded to the degree that the basketball has. No, that's okay because we have the Utah Hockey Club now. We're in the NHL. Right. We're big time now. So there you go.
So, but you actually piqued my. I'm going to get that book for sure because I think assisted. I've always been an assist guy. It's kind of interesting how we kind of fast forward, look at what our skill sets when we played sports to what they are now. I never cared if someone scored a goal. So it's kind of funny. I have a virtual assistant company, which I was more of an assist guy. But the reason why I started that company is pretty interesting is when I was with Fortune Builders, I was always looking for a system or a product to help students do tasks because every time I get on a coaching call, I would give them homework assignments or action items. I'd say, hey, Andy, I need you to do these 3 things in the next week in order to keep moving the needle to be successful.
Yeah.
Only to find out 9 times out of 10, nobody would do anything. And I'm like, there's got to be something out there. And then in 2013, I'll fast forward to 2013 because this started in 2007. 2013, I got introduced to what a virtual assistant was. It was very commonplace in the real estate agent world, but nowhere else. Mm-hmm. And a light bulb went on. I'm like, you know what? I think this could be what our students need. So I hired my first virtual assistant, and I worked with him for a year. And then in 2014, light bulb went on. I'm like, you know what? This could be a business because what I need to do is take all the training that we help create in the coaching program and now put it into the virtual assistant world. Now you have to realize this was my virtual assistants are the Philippines. So I had to build a team in the Philippines. So everything from sourcing, recruiting, everything from training, everything from placements to operations to HR, all of this in the Philippines. So this started back in 2014. Fast forward, we've had thousands of clients. Right now we have, a little over 1,000 virtual assistants as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
A lot.
It is important to when you have systems, you have punch lists, and you have standard operating procedures. Mm-hmm. And in investing in stocks, this is really important. When you invest in stocks, or in real estate, one of the key accelerators to wealth is leverage. And what leverage really means is you're going to do a lot with a little. And then you do a little bit more with a little bit less, then a little bit more with even less. The more leverage you employ, the more you can do with even less, and hopefully you want to be able to do everything with nothing, which like in money, you want to be able to do everything with none of your own money. Eventually, as a real estate investor, the holy grail is, like a Than Merrill. He raises the capital here, and he has the financing here, and he gets sponsorship and equity. He does everything. He lives his life as if he had no money. In other words, his whole system is based on leverage, doing a lot, doing everything with nothing. Well, in the business world, I have this thing called OPEs. In real estate, we could talk about OPM, which is other people's money. But OPE is more powerful than OPM. And OPE, I wrote about this in my book, I said OPE is other people's energy, other people's experience, other people's education, other people's expertise, other people's everything is OPE. And when you can have people that help you do more with less, where I can do more with less of my time, I can do more with less of my own energy. I can do more with less dealing with headaches. And I learn how to help my business with people. You mentioned it earlier that, you and I have some strengths. My strengths is a very narrow skill set, but I do have some. It's very narrow. There's a lot more that I'm not good at than I am good at. And part of entrepreneurship is OPE, not just OPM. It's other people's energy, other people's enthusiasm, other people's effort, other people's expertise, other people's education, other people's everything. And what a beautiful idea is to train, to have people virtually in your business that can do virtually almost anything you want. Mm-hmm. Fantastic lever. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm also going to, I take notes. I want to thank you.
You're documenting everything.
Every time we talk, I love it because you give me so many different ideas every time we talk. And there's a lot of stuff that, I could use to bring back to my team. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh,
I love OP. I love it. But, to talk a little bit about that side of it, documenting and creating leverage. I think we could talk a little bit about that. For entrepreneurs, whether it's in real estate investing or others, as we build our team, we have to look at, we're not all in the same place, right? There's a lot of individuals out there that have, millions and millions and millions of dollars. But majority of us, right, when we first start any business, we have a set
bootstrapping.
Yeah, we're bootstrapping. That's the beauty of being able to leverage, like you talked about, virtual assistants that are in the Philippines or wherever, because they come at a very reduced investment. Because when you look at it, I know in the state of Connecticut, they continue to raise the minimum wage. I think we're at like $15.69 or something, and they're looking to go to like $20 an hour. It's absurd.
Yeah.
So
you
look at all small businesses. Yeah, a lot of people can't afford that. Rather than going to another country and paying them $10 an hour, right? $10 an hour is way better than $20 an hour.
Half.
Right? It's half. So you start looking at that leverage where you can start building your team and outsourcing. It's not good for this country, but we have to do what we have to do as small businesses to be able to get to that point. Then we start bringing, maybe it's a position here, a position there, back to the United States. It's just part of what we have to do as small businesses.
Scaling, when you look at stocks, one of the advantages of stocks is scale. For example, if I wanted to build an iPhone, myself and start that up. You put me in a garage, say, Andy, don't come out until you build an iPhone. Well, I ain't coming out. I'm dying in there. That's where you hold my funeral. But Steve Jobs says, look, I'll share this with you, which is a beautiful concept of shareholder. I'll share it with you. And I can make 300 million iPads and distribute them around the world. I know how to do that. I know you don't. So I can't raise the capital to do a company like that, but I could scale in and buy one share for $212 or whatever the stock price is today, right? I can buy 2 shares or 10 shares, and I can scale. Well, when a person is saying, I want to start a business, one of the challenges, I found as I would grow is there's these little midpoints where you kind of hit capacity and you have enough tasks where you're kind of just grinding and struggling and you're at capacity and a little bit more than you can handle. You bite off a little bit more than you can chew, but it's not so much that you got to hire another $100,000 a year guy that would be working maybe 5 hours a week. You need that 5 hours a week of work because it's killing you, but you don't need 40. And so the idea that not only are you scaling with this money, but you can say, hey, is there a way I could get these tasks done in a scaled way where I'm not paying for time that I don't need yet by making a full hire and full insurance and full medical and full benefits, where I can say, hey, I need 4 hours of this. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and it's kind of funny. That's how we tried everything. So when I started my first virtual assistant company, I tried everything. I tried, $10 or 10 hours, 5 hours, all these different packages. And I ended up with 20 part-time and full-time. So to your point, and when I'm talking to a client or a potential customer, I say, all right, what do you need? So we go through the same process, grab your calendar, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of tasks do you need off your plate? And a lot of times I say start with a part-time because you don't have enough hours right now. And I will exactly put them in that spot because the way I look at it, you want everyone to be successful that's using your product or service. And once they're successful, then they could grow. I think that's very, very important because there's too many people out there that just, push when someone doesn't need it. So I think it's very, very important to get honest, ethical individuals that are in this, any type of space now, because we see this all the time. So I think that's what I'd touch upon.
Awesome stuff. If someone is, has started to dip their toe in the entrepreneur water, or maybe they've been in there for a while and they're listening and they think, man, I'd like to learn more about this. Are you willing to share information with them? Is there a place they could reach out to you? Maybe give your website and they could reach out to you and learn more about whether this is right for them?
Absolutely. Yeah, our website is Reva Global, REVA Global.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all those kind of sites as well. And you can send me an email as well, bob@revaglobal.com.
Fantastic stuff. Well, last, we're going to end on this one. I'm going to let you be your Anthony Robbins hat, and let's see what kind of motivational speech. By the best pregame speech in the history of pregame speeches, and you know which one I'm talking about. And it goes something like this. Great moments are born with great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. One game. You play them 9 times, you play them 10 times, they might win 9, but not tonight. Because tonight, we are the greatest hockey team in the world. I am sick and tired of hearing about how good the Soviets are. Screw them. This is your time. You were born to be hockey players, every one of you. So go out there and take it. I probably butchered that. You're probably like, Andy, don't butcher the perfect speech here.
That was perfect. I want to get.
But it was 80%. 80% there. But I'll tell you. So I'm going to let you give your speech to these guys that are on the freaking fence, that are wanting to get in the game, that are in that 9 to 5. And they've been thinking for years, well, I'd like to do this. And I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start. Give me your little speech and say, hey, get the hell off the fence and let's go. Let's go do it.
Well, I guess I'll give you just a speech of experience, right? Like I said, I've been doing this for 21 years. I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals. And I've found that only about 1% actually get off their butt and take action and take the proper steps forward. So I would say be that 1%, get off that fence and take action.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Well, on that note, don't forget to drop by his website. Give it to him one more time, if you would, Bob.
Sure. Reva Global, REVA Global.com.
And you can reach out to him by email. And as far as investing goes, we love taking people by the hand, walk them step by step. Like, subscribe to this podcast, but also go to yourinvestingclass.com. We got free stuff. I give stuff away for free. I love giving a lot of stuff away for free because it really takes away people's excuses. When you can go and get something right there and just boom and start and get your momentum going, no one has the right to complain because there's plenty of information out there to get someone at least started going that way. So drop by and get those free resources. My guest's been Bob Lachance. We've known each other for many years. I think we're going to come out and see you in the spring, probably sometime in June, so I look forward to that. And I love your team. I learn so much from you every time we get together, so I thank you for sharing your experience with our listeners. Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. I'm Andy Tanner. This is the Cashflow Academy podcast. We'll see you next time.